So, before we delve into the details of his fall, let's set the stage and take a look at how Napoleon rose to power. Napoleon was born in Corsica, a French island, in 1769. He was an ambitious young man who joined the French army at the age of 16. He quickly climbed the ranks, and by the time he was 26, he had become a general. In 1799, when France was in turmoil, Napoleon staged a coup and seized power. He was declared the first consul and became the de facto ruler of France. Over the next few years, he launched a series of successful military campaigns and expanded the French Empire to its greatest extent. Napoleon's early military successes were instrumental in his rise to power. He quickly established himself as a brilliant strategist and leader, winning battles against much larger armies. One of his most notable victories was at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, where he defeated a combined Russian and Austrian force. This victory solidified his position as the dominant military power in Europe. In addition to his military successes, Napoleon was also a skilled politician. He was able to use his victories on the battlefield to gain support from French people and cement his position as emperor. His reforms and modernization efforts also helped to strengthen France's economy and military, making it a formidable power on the world stage. Napoleon's early successes were followed by a series of misfortunes that eventually led to his downfall. One of the main factors was his military defeats, which began with the disastrous Russian campaign in 1812. The harsh winter and guerrilla tactics of the Russian army caused heavy casualties among Napoleon's troops, weakening his military power and reputation. Another factor was the economic struggle that France faced during this period. The continental system, which aimed to isolate Britain economically, hurt French trade and caused inflation. This led to public discontent and weakened Napoleon's support base. On April 11, 1814, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of France and one of the greatest military leaders in history, abdicates the throne and in the Treaty of Fontainebleau is banished to the Mediterranean island of Elba. Napoleon's exile to the island of Elba marked a turning point in his life. After being forced to abdicate as Emperor of France, he was exiled to the small Mediterranean island off the coast of Italy. Despite being confined to a relatively small area, Napoleon managed to make the most of his time in Elba. He implemented a number of reforms and improvements to the island, including the construction of roads and buildings. However, Napoleon's time in Elba was short-lived. In March 1815, he escaped from the island and returned to France, where he quickly regained power and began his famous 100 Days campaign. Although Napoleon's return to power was initially met with enthusiasm by many French citizens, it ultimately led to his downfall. His military defeats at the Battle of Waterloo and subsequent exile to St. Helena marked the end of his reign and his life. The Battle of Waterloo was a pivotal moment in European history and one that would ultimately lead to Napoleon's final defeat. On June 18, 1815, the French army led by Napoleon faced off against the combined forces of the British, Dutch, and Prussian armies under the command of the Duke of Wellington and Field Marshal Blucher. The battle was fierce and lasted all day, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. However, it was the arrival of the Prussian army later in the day that turned the tide of the battle. With the additional troops, the Allied forces were able to overwhelm the French and secure a decisive victory. Napoleon was forced to abdicate for a second time and was exiled to the island of St. Helena, where he would spend the rest of his life in captivity. Napoleon's fall had a profound impact on France and Europe as a whole. It marked the end of an era and the beginning of a new one, with far-reaching consequences that are still felt today. In France, the fall of Napoleon led to a period of political instability and economic hardship. The country was forced to pay heavy reparations to its former enemies, which further weakened its already fragile economy. However, it also paved the way for the modernization of France as the new government sought to rebuild the country and established a more stable political system. In Europe, the fall of Napoleon marked the end of the Napoleonic Wars and the beginning of a new era of peace and diplomacy. The Congress of Vienna, which was held in 1815 to redraw the map of Europe, established a new balance of power that would shape the continent for decades to come. It also marked the rise of nationalism and the emergence of new nation-states, as people across Europe began to demand greater political autonomy and self-determination. Overall, the legacy of Napoleon's fall, its complex and multifaceted, while it brought about significant challenges and hardships, it also paved the way for important political and social reforms that helped to shape the modern world.